to order the workshop of the Brookings City Council at 7:15 p.m. Call the roll.
Councilor Wonder.
Here.
Councilor Jawada.
Here.
Councilor Martin.
Here.
Councilor Bond.
Here.
Mayor Correa.
Here. We will start with item C1, amendment to Tourism Event Fund Assistance Application.
Yes, Mayor and Council, before you tonight is the actual application in its current state. When there was a discussion at the last council meeting as to possibly making an amendment to the existing application, that's what I've brought forward tonight. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page here. There have been folks that have asked for the more than 2,000, but Mr. Frederick brought up a great point. It doesn't state it on there that they can ask for more than 2,000. So my suggestion is there in the red where it just basically says applicants may request an amount greater than the 2,000 provided additional request is directly tied to advertising and marketing efforts designed to increase tourism and attract out-of-area visitors. Request above 2,000 must include a clear explanation of how those funds will be used and will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis, subject to available funding and city approval. So what I've done is just, like I said, I've attached the existing one, and we would simply, on paragraph number 2, make that additional statement on there, just letting folks know that they can't ask for more than the 2,000 because, and there was a question brought forward as to the 2,000. I think it's gone back and forth, 2,000 and 3,000, and as all of you know, prior to COVID, things were a little bit more affordable, and post-COVID, things, advertising is another one where the prices have jumped, just like everything else. So this is simply, I mean, we're not taking any action tonight. This is a workshop, but I just wanted to kind of get the flavor of the council, to kind of see if they're okay with just moving forward with doing something as simple as that.
I'm okay with it as is. I thought, isn't that most of that sentence, that paragraph redundant? Isn't the first 2,000 needed to be used directly for advertising and marketing?
Yes, it is.
And requests, and it must be, isn't it all, but it's fine. You're almost reiterating,
yeah.
Hey, by the way, all this has to be used for it, which is fine.
I can go back and try to shorten it up a little bit. I was just trying to cover a lot of bases there.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions about
Sure.
this. So besides the advertising and promotion, what about securing a venue when there's a cost for a venue for a local event?
Typically, that's not what, although, let me go back. I think folks have utilized funds prior to us talking about this for those type of situations. They've used it for venues and hiring bands and DJs, but if you actually look at what the event funding assistance is for the tourism, it's primarily to facilitate advertising and marketing to drive more people here. So I think prior to this, prior to when TPAC disbanded back in, I think it was 2021, I think there was cases where they were allowed to utilize funds outside of advertising and promotion and marketing for that. So again, this could be on a case-by-case basis as well, if the council desires to do that as well.
Well, I'd like to see that included. I think sometimes that could be a major cost. And then also, if we have citizens or a nonprofit or even a business in the community that has an idea for an event that could attract tourists or visitors here, again, I'd like to see it. We obviously want to have safeguards that the money's used for the intended purpose, but let's say they have an advertising campaign in the Rogue Valley through different media there. I think instead of them putting the money out of their own pocket towards that, the portion that the city's going to pay for, I think there should be a mechanism where the those funds can be available, at least to, and securing that advertising, that the funds will be paid to the group within a certain amount of time to cover it, where a private individual or business isn't going to have to foot the entire cost of an event up front.
I myself has a little bit of hesitancy of doing that up front. I think there's no guarantee if you give upfront money that it actually funds the intended purpose, and we by law need to be cautious and careful with having documentation for the use of taxpayers' dollars. So I wouldn't personally feel good about, and maybe Lori Cooper can speak to some of the legalities of the ways that we need to use these funds, because to me that seems a little concerning, that we would give somebody funding up front for something that we have no assurances and then have to go back after the fact and try to go through a process to reclaim those funds, because they do have to be spent for specifically promoting this area and increasing tourism.
Well, at the very least, I'd like to see staff find ways to expedite funding these. And then also, if there's ways that if there's media in the Rogue Valley, that the advertising is being purchased through, that as part of the agreement with these groups looking for promotion funds, that the media is aware, the TV stations or radio stations or ad agencies know the city is guaranteeing a certain amount of money for the event. Again, I think events are going to be more successful. We want individuals and groups, businesses to have skin in the game, but if they have to take all the risk, I think we're going to see less events that are successful.
And our city attorney's online right now, or?
I believe so.
It seems like it could be broadened to, because I heard two things here of right now it would appear we're really limiting these funds to advertising and marketing. But what I read was it's broader in that it promotes tourism, super broad. So if somebody spent a large amount of money on the event in Brookings and then a smaller amount of money advertising in the Valley, we shouldn't just, hypothetical, we shouldn't just limit our help there to the small amount of money in advertising, because they are promoting tourism by telling the Valley about this event here, and we should help with the overall event.
I'd be really curious. I know Lincoln City has, and I think maybe Seaside as well, they have dollars that are specifically earmarked towards events. When I looked at their budget as a whole, it was a very small amount. But I'd be very curious to see if we could get more information about what that looks like for them. I think, we have a couple of coastal cities that are very successful in tourism. I think part of that is their proximity to Portland and Eugene, and it's much easier to get to those areas than it is to get here. It takes more effort to get here. But I think knowing what they're doing that works already would be great information to have at our disposal, and knowing the way that they, as a city, utilize those dollars to target advertising or promoting their areas, and how they kind of divvy up those funds. And I personally feel like events are one-offs, and I think they're great, and I think big events can bring reoccurring traffic. But I'm not sure that a whole bunch of event promotion is necessarily the best way long-term to promote our area and get more recognition, because I think that's part of somebody said it tonight, the best kept secret. You know, there's so many people that don't know about our area, but even having quality places for them to stay is a challenge here. And so I think there's some other pieces to that puzzle, but I don't know that it's best return on our investment to do a whole bunch of little one-off events, and that's going to have the greatest amount of impact.
Well, I still would like to see staff come up with some information for us on how to easily provide funds for groups that want to have an event, and how to assist them where they don't have to put all the money themselves up front.
We can do a little bit more, excuse me, research into this, because TPAC itself is getting ready to gin up really soon as well. So, but yeah, we can look into that. I would be remiss to say, I believe today we got another request from for TIFA funding is what it's called, and it's only, I think that's the third one we received the entire year. So for this calendar year so far. So and what we try to do is also remind them all of this stuff has to be turned in 60 days, at least 60 days prior to the event. It's what we typically request. So if you're going to put on an event and you do and 2 weeks before the event, come to city and ask for funding, that puts a lot of stress and strain on everybody involved. And most of these events, you don't have to worry about it. They've been doing them for years, and they know exactly, how the program works. But that's all we would like to emphasize. But no, we certainly don't want to get in the way of an event being successful. We want those events here, and we want them to be successful. But we also, like I said, just give us an appropriate amount of time in order to do that as well. So
there may be a way to kind of advocate and cover some of those initial upfront costs and still protect the city in a way that we could potentially write that 50% of the funds would become available with a business plan or whatever for the event, and then upon completion of the event, and the receipts required, the remaining funds would then be allocated. And then, hey, if they don't give you what's needed after the events and they're non-compliant, then they're off the list, right? I mean, that's sorry, your future events aren't going to work out for you because you took money from the city with the understanding that you'd provide all these things, and you didn't provide that substantiation, so you'd be potentially disqualified from future applications. So I don't know. There could be a way to protect the city and still provide some of the upfront costs required to promote the event, I think.
Can Lori Cooper speak specifically to that idea? If we give half the cost up front and don't get the documentation we need for audit records, what does that look like on the city side?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear us?
Maybe not. She must have heard us a minute ago because she.
I'm here, guys. Can you hear me?
yes.
We can hear you, Lori. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
So I've been following the discussion. I really like to, I probably need to see the written agreement, but I do know that there's lots of cities who have contract with marketing and promotion companies using their TLT funds. And, there's language in that allows, quarterly payments, what have you. So I don't quite understand the question, but I think you can have language in a contract that will allow you to stop payment if, it's not being used for proper purposes, and to claw back payments if it was used for a purpose that wasn't anticipated, or allowed by the TLT. So I'm not sure if I understood your question there. Is that am I on the right track there?
It's a little bit different. So we're not talking about hiring a marketing and promotion firm. What the discussion is here is if businesses or members of the community want to put on an event that is going to bring tourism into our community, and the city would allocate some funds towards their event, there's been discussion about giving the business or the citizen funds up front before they've put up the money and shown proof of those purchases. And Councilor Momberg suggested that maybe we could give half of those funds with the assurance that once they paid everything, then we get all of the receipts. And what I'm asking is, for taxpayer purposes and our record keeping and audit records, for the city to give money to either a business or a community member to promote their event before those expenses have been made. If they don't follow through with that, and half of that money has already been given or all of the money has already been given, what kind of position does that put us in as a city and with our audit records if we're giving money to events that never occur?
I see. I understand now. Yeah, I mean, it's not a good position. It's like, again, I'd like to see the language, or I can find some example language, but usually I think the way those things work is for a business or citizen or an event holder to provide receipts after they've, incurred the expense. But I'm sure, it could probably work the other way as well. It's just going to be harder to recoup, the money that the city has handed over if the event doesn't happen. So, there could be some strong language put in a contract or a bond put up, or, I guess that probably kind of defeats the purpose, though. A lot of these entities that are putting on events are nonprofit probably and can't really afford, to be kicking that much money. So anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying, there's a lot of leeway with the use of TLT monies, and you got to be careful with the language in contracts so that you can make sure that they're enforceable and you can recover. If the contract's been breached, you can recover the funds. So. And then, broad way of saying, I'd like to see the contract, and I think it's allowable. That's the broad question, I guess. I think it would be allowable, but it would need to have the proper sign words.
And what kind of legal expenses would be incurred if those weren't refunded, and then we're having to try to recoup those funds?
Right. Well, as you all probably know, it's hard. It's always harder to get money back once you've paid it out. So it just depends on the language of the contract. Like if there's some lien language or some sort of enforceable mechanism that will get the attention of the person or entity who the money was given to, then it's easier to get that money back. But it could be a legal contractual fight. So that's not cheap. I can't really give you an estimate until I wouldn't know the complexity of it, but yeah, it's not cheap. You can get attorney's fees recovered if you win in some kind of contract fight like that.
Yeah, I personally,
always, you don't want to start from that position.
Well, for $5,000, and really what I was talking about was how do we reduce the city's exposure, right? So if we're talking about a maximum award amount of $5,000 to someone to promote an event, and we say, okay, for this deliverable, meaning a business plan, everything you provide to us with, what your plan is, and we approve it, we provide, say $2,500, say half of the amount, and our exposure is only $2,500. So like when we talk about like legal fees, for $2,500, I don't think so. But what you could do is, hey, after the event has concluded and they fail to provide you the remaining deliverables, including invoices, including receipts, all those things, they could then potentially be taken off the list of future opportunities.
Would that get us in trouble with our auditors, though? I don't know what that looks like. Is that a ding on the audit if we've expended these funds, but it's not, that's a concern to me. Like I know in my work life, I have to provide all this documentation to an auditor, and it can ding us if we don't have the legal backup for how those expenses were used.
Right, but in this scenario, sorry, Jim, give me a sec. In this scenario, we are paying for something that has been delivered. So we set that deliverable. We say, for you providing this deliverable, you will be granted $2,500. And so
Meaning like the plan of the
the
event?
business plan, the event, everything, whatever that is, whatever that looks
It's a
like.
very similar conversation that we had for the facade improvement program, that we're very similar, that how do we get people to use these monies, and what if there's no receipts on the back end, and maybe we can look into, do people provide grants for startup companies, and with a business plan and with an event plan, you could request startup funds, and if we don't get them back, they're off the list. But yeah, trying to recover $2,500, we'll pay more than that to get back.
Yeah, for sure.
I
Yeah,
think
for
an easy
sure.
way to look at this is if a organization has an idea for an event and they have an advertising plan, they're using media, let's say in the Rogue Valley, or an ad agency. Here's their advertising campaign. Here's the bill from KOBI. They bring it to the city cuts the check for the advertising for KOBI and sends it with that purpose.
Directly.
Instead of going through all this delay of getting funded. And I know, changing subject just a little bit, normally we don't have public comment at this, but we do have like experts that'll talk, and we have Mike in the audience who's put events together, and I'd like to hear from him. Just if you had to foot $5,000 of your own money up front, or if the city was providing funds through the TLT money or the transient lodging tax to help advertise for it, of having that money available ahead of time, how more likely are you to be committed and involved in that, organizing that event?
It's a little different for us now because we've been around.
Could you?
Could you come up to the mic? I'm sorry.
It's a little different for us now. We've been around for like 13 years, and it wouldn't be the same as when we were doing it 8, 9, 10 years ago. But we're starting an event, and we're on the hook for $12,000 in expenses before it starts. And if you're telling me that I'm not going to get that $3,000 till after it's over, that's not an incentive for me to do anything. I'm not going to do it. If you're telling me, okay, here's $5,000, but you don't get it till after it's over, you're not going to have people doing stuff, not nearly as much, because they're coming to you because they don't have the money. So that cuts right there. I mean, maybe if you're saying, okay, half up front, okay, that softens the blow at least. But yeah, I'm just telling you, if you're not giving the money up front, you're not going to be inspiring anybody to do anything. It's just not going to happen. And I do want to make the comment, too, that I appreciate Councilor Gelada bringing up the broadness or vagueness of some of the descriptions. And on that note, I mean, I think I mentioned once before, I think it used to be with the TPAC, you're trying to get things started. You weren't trying to have things that you were funding every single year. The idea was to give them self-sustaining, hopefully. So seeing these ones that are getting $5,000 every single year seems a little odd to me. But I also need to bring up that $50,000 was taken out of the money that was supposed to be going to tourism promotion to build the event center up at the golf course. That's not advertising or marketing. So it's been, so just, I would like to see it softer than it has to every single penny be advertising, marketing, and I would agree with that too. But yeah, the whole thing on the money, if it's all afterwards, you're just not going to see it. And for the best kept secret on the coast, bringing people to a fun event is a great way for them to get to know it and find it. And when we're doing stuff, we're promoting it in the valley when we're distributing beer and stuff too. So that's part of our plan.
But can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
If you're having an event, let's just say the event's going to cost you $12,000, and your advertising budget, part of that event is going to be $5,000. I mean, filling out a couple of pieces of paper to get reimbursed, I mean, if you're already going to spend the money, then that's why I'm confused.
I agree. I'm saying, now maybe we'd be like, well, yeah, okay, we'll fill out the paperwork, and if we have to wait until afterwards, we can probably do that. We couldn't do that 8, 9 years ago. We couldn't do that. That's too big of a risk, too much money up
Are you
front.
talking about when you first started up?
Yeah,
Okay.
and we're talking about, what I have in mind with the tourism money, again, is not refunding the same thing over and over and over, because some of them are really good investments, some of them are not as good an investment. But hopefully getting things going so that they're self-sustaining, and then that money can be used to develop more things or do more different advertising or whatever. So, yeah, it just, yeah.
So if I'm hearing you right, you're saying when you were a newer business, it would have been too heavy of a lift, but now your business is established. And so your vision is to help other new event promoters.
It would be easier, well, I mean, if we were going to start some new event at this point, I would probably still come and talk to you about it, because, I mean, I think we do a great job promoting Brookings. I mean, we're for 5 years in a row, we're in the top 100 fan favorite destinations in the state, and we've been moving up every single year. This is advertised in all the airports all around, and that's just, one of the ways that we promote. But, I mean, would I still come back if we were going to start up some other event and ask for some promotion and advertising money? Sure, because we're probably going to be taking things to the valley and advertising all over there on top of that. So, but, yeah, back then, if I was starting a new thing and I was small, I mean, trying to start the film festival or something like that 4 years ago, and you said I had to cough up the $5,000 up front, wouldn't have done it. I mean, Sue would have, but, yeah.
We will spend what we can, so if we couldn't get money prior to the event, we just have to cut back what we're spending. If we have it available and we can go over to the valley and do digital marketing, then we'll do it. If we can't afford that and we have to pay for it as we're going along, then we will pare it back to what we can afford.
Which is then
Understood.
less people coming
Less
in and
impact
less growth.
is what you're saying.
Yes, and just to add on what Margaret, what Mike is saying, this is our 4th year. In our 2nd year, we had a gift of $20,000 in kind from KBRT in Valley, which helped get us lifted. Last year, we had a TIFA grant, and for that money, a TIFA grant, we're using that. The intent is to become an annual event every year and be sustainable after our 5th year, but we're not quite there yet. And so the help from the city is really appreciated.
And they're very rapidly growing.
I do thank you for bringing up some events get more, or the process of how it gets brought up. I think that's important to have on the application. If there's more funds available and it's going to come to council to vote on that, that needs to be very clearly disclosed, for sure. So.
Well, I can certainly do some research and get some verbiage that could probably work for this without having a bunch more paperwork, more delays. We can figure out a way, sort of a hardship cost, if that's what they would like it to be. Starting out, we can certainly take it on a case-by-case basis. So.
Okay, can the new guy interject here with an idea?
Yeah.
Can you look up the bond issue?
The bond issue.
You're only talking $5,000. The bond can't be more than $50. Bond is nothing more than insurance. You want to insure the event. You want to ensure that you get all the receipts. You want insurance that the $5,000 is spent appropriately, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was brought up earlier about bringing up a bond. You can get a bond for an event, I guarantee it.
Yeah. I mean,
The city's got to work with an insurance company at some point. There's got to be a way to get a bond to protect an event, both on the city side and on the event promoter side.
But typically, that's done by the event promoter. I mean,
Correct.
Yeah.
I understand that, but perhaps look at it from that coming from the city side, because we're trying to protect our investment. Our taxpayer dollars, we're trying to protect that, so why can't we get a bond on that? And you can transfer the cost, split the cost, whatever it is, but there should be a way to get a bond in order to get over the hump of
I can look into that.
Uncertainty.
I can certainly look into that.
I think that was one of the things Lori Cooper stated, was something
I
about
think
a bond.
that's where I heard it, and it was sticking in my head. And I was
Yeah,
just like,
she said
you know,
something
there might be a
about
way.
nonprofits not having the funding for a bond if, they were coming to the city for,
But she also said that, we have a lot of leeway in how we do this, and I think we need to find a way to say, yes, we need to protect taxpayers, but we need to help these events be successful and make it easier, not harder on them.
Yeah, that's the only challenge I think you'll have with a bond is when a business goes to get a bond, they're essentially assessing your assets to determine if you're good for the money, right? And so it's a whole nother step.
Hurdle.
There's a whole nother hurdle, and for something, like a small organizing group trying to get something going, that might be difficult, especially if they're not already established and don't, as an organization, have those, have those assets to be, accounted for.
I 100% agree with what you're saying. However, the city has plenty of assets. The city has plenty of that type of collateral, if that's what you want to use it for. I'm just saying, on $5,000, the bond is probably not going to be more than $50 to $100.
No, yeah, I agree. And it wouldn't be the city that would be assessed. Like when the person applying for the $5,000 thing would need to secure a bond, is what you're saying. And for them to do that, their assets would need to be assessed. And it might be difficult for...
And I understand that completely. What I'm saying is that the person who's putting on the event is jointly working
No.
with the city to do it. And yes, I know you can do that because I've done that in business many times, where both people pull the bond.
Oh, God, like a joint
Exactly.
kind of thing.
In regards to changing this TIFA form, the bold advertising and marketing, preface it with, for example. I read that as this money is only for.
well, that's what it has been.
That's right, but on the page before in the red, well, I guess it does say directly, but what I've read about TLT funds is broader. It's to attract tourism, so it's not specifically for marketing and advertising. It's to attract tourism. And in my hypothetical example, that if you're putting on something here and a small amount of advertising going on around us, you're promoting the event, but you're spending more here. We should consider those funds. As I read it, the TLT funds would apply to that.
I think that was Councilor Martin's point, right? To extend it more than just the advertising.
Yeah, the venue, if somebody had an event that was bringing a performer or an act or, a band, that could be included with it as well.
Outside.
But it has to be advertised out. It has to be advertised outside. At least as I read the TLT, if you're only putting up sandwich boards in town, you're not promoting tourism necessarily, except for the people driving through town. There has to be actions taken to bring people into town.
Yeah.
Well, I can certainly, like I said, between myself and some staff, come back with some recommendations for the council.
Is there any more discussion? Okay. Move on to C2, system development charge discussion.
This should be a fast one.
So we've, I think in the last couple of workshops, we talked about this. Most recently, we left the last workshop in sort of the discussion in Lori, our attorney's hands, to help craft kind of an approach for a policy for SDC deferral, or not deferral, but what do you say?
Waiver.
Exemptions, sorry. So we discussed this at the last meeting, April 27. Just staff draft a policy that would include up to 50% reduction in SDCs for development of multifamily housing that included 4 units or more. We're in a meeting, we directed City Attorney Lori Cooper to develop or at least come back with some kind of policy direction, and she prepared a memo, which you guys have in place, on the guys, for you guys to read. I think you guys received it last week. One thing I want to note on here, though, in her memo, she throws out some options. We already have the deferral option available, and we also have the financing option available. So really what we're talking about today specifically is exemptions. So I just want to focus on that part, which is I think on page 2. Note in her comments as well that typically exemptions come with kind of a give back, which is establishing the affordable, rent funded through the housing. So it says automatic exemption for projects funded by a housing authority or governmental authorities, home ownership and rental housing, including lease to own, minimal level of affordability required to qualify for different types of projects, minimum duration of affordability up to 5 years. I know we've had this discussion in the past. I want to bring it up again, rather than just giving money away for projects that don't have any strings attached. Just again, Lori's brought this up as well in her memo. I know I brought it up at the last meeting. I know we talked about maybe not even having strings attached to it, but I think it's still worth a discussion among councilors if you want to move forward with this. She provided, I think, some information. There's some attachments here from the Department of Land Conservation Development, sort of action sheets on how to do this. She's also provided a sample code language for waivers that we could maybe use as model code. So with that, if you have any questions, entertain further discussion on it. I'm sure this is going to be the last time we talk about it.
I think, the housing analysis is going to be an important part of this discussion, it seems to me. More information coming out of that and seeing, like I know already they said affordable is a third, the middle income is a third, and then the higher earnings are a third. So that middle income section is definitely another demographic that is a struggle for our community as well. So, personally, I would hate for us to move too far forward and not have put the cart before the horse and not have more information that we need from that. But I know we already have someone here wanting to.
Yeah, that's my perspective is, we've had this idea on the books for quite some time about how can we, and there's money set aside for it, to help encourage development of workforce housing. And you all were at the meeting. We finally have someone here that's ready to go, willing to do it, and I feel like we need to step up. Now, that doesn't mean we can't reassess later down the line if we determine that, hey, that's not sustainable, or hey, that's, maybe there's other factors now that we have the housing needs assessment completed. But I do feel like I think it behooves us to take action when the opportunity presents itself. And I think that if we have someone, and there could be others, right, in the very near future that could say, hey, I want to build a fourplex. How can the city, can you cut some of the fees down a little to help encourage? And I think we should step up to the plate that we've got that opportunity here. And even if that means, a 50% reduction in SDCs, I don't think that's unreasonable. I do think that putting too many strings attached to it would just discourage someone. If you say you can build a building, but it's got to be rent controlled, I don't think I would do that if I was a developer personally.
It could be a targeted cost, a targeted entry point, but yeah.
So how would that help us develop how is that an incentive to help us development homes that are actually affordable then?
So I think by nature, fourplexes and, eightplexes, and those are generally, more affordable housing. It's not something that someone's buying as an investment opportunity to turn into an Airbnb. There's already restrictions on it. They can't do that. We, with the Planning Commission, helped to put some of those in place. So I think that specific type of housing is suited for this type of I don't know, call it encouragement, whatever I think there's protections in place. Now, if you were to just say, hey, you're doing single family residential and you've got multiple, and and then you come to the city and say, I want to cut on SDC fees for workforce development housing, I would be very leery about that, right? Because they're developing single family dwellings, and there's no protections, like you said, for the city. They're just going to sell it for the best profit they can get, and that's not necessarily workforce housing. So anyway, that's just my thoughts on it. This is a workshop. We're able to speak openly because we're not voting on anything. I'm just kind of spitballing here.
Have you seen anything based on square footage, on designs, on these would apply regardless of other limits?
Well, I believe this would be
800 square foot apartments, and by the nature of that limit, that is workforce housing.
Yeah, and I believe this would be on a case-by-case basis. I believe, Tony had mentioned also possibly setting aside a certain amount each year, because like he said before, we have some funding set aside right now to pay for these SDCs. And also, like I said, to kind of, like you just alluded to, Councilor Gelada, making sure that this is the type of housing that is going to attract the workforce housing that we need here. And if they're building an eightplex, possibly give us kind of what the rent range is going to be with your proposal that you're going to be giving us, and or so forth. So I think there's some factors there that can contribute to it. And but yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Somebody had, I forgot, somebody had mentioned at the last council meeting, we were talking about this, how many people have applied for deferrals, or it's very few, right?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I don't, and Lori can correct me, but I don't think a case-by-case basis is going to work in this situation. We need to establish a policy, criteria, and...
No, I meant, okay, I'm sorry. When I meant case by case, it's just like when they turn it in, we can kind of review make sure that the builder's legit, and all these things is what I'm talking about. Not like a...
how much we're funding.
Yeah, how much we're funding. That's what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about making sure all of our ducks are in a row before we do the exemption. So that's all I'm saying.
Well, I think the policy, or the policy is going to really set the groundwork for this.
Sure.
So we're going to receive information from builders, and if they don't meet that criteria, they're not going to get funding.
You just compare what they submit to what the policy says, and it's...
Exactly.
But I mean, I'd like Lori to chime in on this section that she wrote out about cities should decide what types of projects qualify. Are some of these in her list? Are these regulated by the state? I mean, should we consider that, giving funding out for an eightplex with no strings is a good move for the city, and make sure that we're not, because I don't want to move the goalposts. I don't want us to look at this for 1 year and then revisit it. I think that's unfair to the person or the developer who wants to receive funding in a year and didn't have to follow the criteria the previous year. That would be a slippery slope, in my opinion. So again, from a staff perspective, I just don't feel comfortable not having something that they have to account for. But
even if it was square footage based, that if you're building the fourplex or eightplex that are 600 square foot, apartments.
Well, I mean, I would agree that we need to do something, but I don't think giving out 50% of the SDC fee, me personally, as staff, my recommendation would be not to give out 50% of the funding and not have anything attached to it, whether it be a 5-year guarantee that the rents will be controlled or something other than just give it out. And I agree that the types of housing we're going to get with fourplex, eightplexes and up, they're going to be generally lower. But I mean, you heard the applicant, the person asking for the funding, he said, I'm not interested in having any control over it, so.
Well, when I read through what was provided from the Department of Land and Conservation of other people's codings, they all do have some type of language that way. Every one of them did.
What specifically, what kind of?
About AMIs, it's not a dollar amount, it's an AMI. So based on the average median income of our area, it has to be affordable to those people. So it's not like saying you can only charge, $400. It's saying it has to meet within something that this income bracket for specifically Brookings is able to afford. And every single one of these had something like that in it if they were going to provide the funding for SDCs.
But to some extent too, we're in competition with our neighbors for builders, right? And if we had a more aggressive policy, it might attract builders.
I believe so. I think you're going to have more folks want to, more skin in the game if there is something out there that's an incentive. Absolutely.
Well, it's a supply and demand issue.
It is.
It's a free market economy that we live in. And the reason why housing costs are higher here is because the availability is lower here. That's simple math. And so, I feel like we got to figure out a way to encourage more of what we're asking for in a way that doesn't prohibit someone from taking advantage of it. So I think maybe there's a balance, right? Maybe there's some middle ground to be had, but if a builder's just scared off, you say, you're going to do rent control, I'm just not interested. Like, what did we accomplish? I don't know. That's my concern.
If we could get more houses built here, people will come, housing prices will drop, supply and demand. I agree. And I would be, if we could reduce the restrictions on this, if we're just getting builders coming here to build houses or apartments, it's a good thing, period. And I know the money has to come from somewhere. And we have to be concerned about that because it's probably coming out of the general fund otherwise.
Well, we actually have, how much is it set aside, Tony?
I don't recall.
It's over $1 million
Yeah.
set aside at this point that's not being utilized.
It's like
to Tony's-
wastewater, it's the wastewater fund, the water fund, the road funds that build the parks, that build this is infrastructure costs.
But to Tony's point, we have to be concerned about, coming back in a year from now and saying, we got to change over here and go over here and try to come up with something that we think has some legs. But yeah, whatever we could do to get things built, period. That is what we can do to improve our housing situation.
If we could get Lori maybe to weigh in on this, on these specific requirements that we're finding and we see pretty common, that'd be great. I mean, I think her opinion on this would be helpful.
Sure. So in my research, I found, state law doesn't, it has very few restrictions on reductions of SDCs or waivers of SDCs. There are a lot of, as you know, I'm sure you all know, there are a lot of sideboards on SDC process and how you set your formulas and all that. So that what concerns me is the mayor's right, and I look around and I've seen other cities that had SDC reductions with no strings attached. Because as somebody mentioned, it's going to become market rate. But at least you're getting some workforce housing built, right? So that's the trade-off. So it'd be an experiment. It'd be an experiment that I've never seen the results of yet, and no other cities tried it. There's been loans to developers to encourage them to develop, and then there's, of course, the strings that are attached, especially when there's some other funding involved, right? So you have to have strings attached when there's federal or state funding involved to provide for, affordable or workforce housing. So, it's just, I can't, there's no legal, black and white that I can give you about it. It's not, it's just that the fact that other cities haven't done it gives me pause. And then I think you do need to have criteria that get applied fairly to anybody and everybody who applies to get an SDC reduction. And then also, we talked about, you have a fund, the papers I've read and the authorities I've read say, most cities backfill into their SDC pots that they've, borrowed from or given breaks to developers from. So I don't know what that million, and I'm sorry if I didn't pay attention in the past, I know you talked about that, I've heard that number, $1 million, but if it's from SDC funds, there's just concerns about backfilling and about equal treatment of folks who, paid into that fund. Are they getting out of what they put for us?
Yeah.
So,
Lori,
I don't know, it's making me uncomfortable.
Lori, the funding mechanism for these exemptions would not come out of the existing SDC account right now. It is money that was allocated to us during COVID, and it's unrestricted, and it's setting aside, and that's why Lou had mentioned it, I believe, a couple council meetings ago. But no, this first run at exemptions would not come out of the SDC funds that are,
It is a good thing to think through that if we set this policy up,
Sure.
and then we use up all those funds and exemptions, then the infrastructure costs do have to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
And if everybody else is paid in a certain amount to share the cost
Sure.
of those.
well, again, this could be like, obviously, I think Bend and Eugene and Salem, which are all, of course, much bigger cities than us, they do have exemption policies put in place right now. And I think if we were allowed to, like I said, move forward, set an amount of almost like a cap for the total of what we would be allocating for the year one, as opposed to just dumping it all into the first year. I think that might help.
There seemed to be a lot of, I read, I think what Lori supplied, and I found sort of the same thing on the web, that there were a lot of downsides with the cap, that it imposed a lot of policies that you would have to in the handout, the secondary handout on page 2, setting a cap decreases predictability, increases the effort required for applicants. It had also, you had to provide notice of available funds, establishing a it seemed that now there was a windowing process that wouldn't have existed without the cap.
We can use our budget process for that, though. We can
Okay.
establish it through our budget process, and,
Okay, you didn't have any concerns? What I read about the cap is something to avoid.
it seems like, we're going to have to obviously announce it and, publicly announce that we have this pot of money. We're looking for applicants who want to utilize this funding. It's very similar to other things that we do. So, facade improvement programs, good example. We set an amount and we accept applications. We haven't reached max out of our funding availability annually, but we could do that with this, where we just establish it at budget, the maximum amount we want to spend.
Can I say something, Mayor?
Please.
Yeah, I mean, what Tony just said makes sense, and I was thinking along the same lines, maybe some sort of like, a grant application type thing where there's criteria and the council can look at the way who looks like, maybe there'd be 10, maybe there'd be 2, maybe there'd be 1, I don't know, but who's, it's sort of like an RFP, who's the responsible, qualified, applicant who's got the horses to develop what they're saying, what they're proposing to do. So I think having some, you don't want to make it a huge process and a huge bar for people to have to jump over, but when you're basically giving away money, then there has to be, I would think there has to be, for the taxpayer, it has to be some sort of process that shows that you're getting the most bang for your buck. So that's just my thought.
And part of that application could be to include the amount that the rental rates would be or something along that lines to see.
Well, we currently require that for deferrals, so I mean, it would be
No,
the
it's
same language.
asking what are they planning to
Oh, okay,
charge?
okay, not-
Is what
not-
I'm saying,
I
not
see.
saying you even that in part of the grant application to have some kind of awareness of, is it going to be something that is affordable?
Sure. But non-binding or?
Well, it's
proposed
an application. So her suggestion was applicants for a grant, and the council decides who gets the grant funds based on the criteria. Am I understanding that right?
Yes, I mean, in a very general way. I mean, I've seen other cities, and I don't know where the funding came from, it's escaping right now, but just looking for affordable housing and asking for, and then, let's say there was some city-owned vacant land, and the city wanted to make sure that, affordable housing was built on that land, and they took proposals from developers for that kind of thing. So just something along those lines, maybe not as involved as what I'm talking about, but yes, Mayor, that's correct.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have land that we can do that with.
We got a few parks we could probably transfer in.
I don't know if people would be happy about that.
No.
It's a park.
Can you imagine the apartment community at Azalea Park?
There will be one. Right next door.
Well, I do think if we can possibly come back with something that is amenable to the council here, and I think what we're trying to establish is the criteria, because if you have somebody that comes in and they've built in the last 3 years 500 doors, 500 apartments, versus somebody who's kind of thinking about getting into the multifamily business, what I'm saying is somebody that's established, that's got a track record, versus maybe somebody that's gone bankrupt 6 times in a row trying to build. That's the kind of things I think is going to be important to the criteria. But if you have it set up in a grant situation where it's almost like a points, based on other things too, so that would be very helpful for us as well.
It would need to be some kind of scoring system.
Sure.
For sure.
Well, I agree.
Seems like.
The volume discount, it did promote builders to come into the area and then hire people locally, and they see a longevity to this deal.
Well, and as Jamie alluded to when he came here, he was talking about the building in Klamath Falls. The more doors that are built, the lower the rent goes, because it's not everything's at a premium at that point too. So
I'm surprised we're on the list of the most affordable places to retire.
Well, but did you see there was a caveat? There was like, well, maybe we need to relook at Brookings on that. Did you see that little sentence on that?
So I just want to state that the SDC waiver sample that Lori provided to us needs a whole rework, because it does include language in there that has requirements. So we're going to have to try and craft a policy that doesn't include that if that's the council's desire.
Well, we
need a director to do that.
There could be, there could be some requirements without going full-blown rent control. Like there's got to be some ways you could potentially say that the affordable housing or the housing units had to be rental units, right? That's one way of protecting the city. You don't want someone to buy something and flip it, right? That's what we're talking about protecting against. So it could be a caveat that it has to be a rental unit
For a minimum time.
right? And then that also protects in a way that they're not going to be using it as an Airbnb. That it's going to have to be for a long-term rental use in that scenario. But anyway, I think there's some protections that can be put in place without going full-on rent control. I guess that scares me when I hear that, because I think in most cases it scares off developers.
So with it being tied to the median income, like it is in other cities, what do you think about that? Not a dollar.
It's kind of almost saying the same thing in a different way, though.
Okay.
That's my feeling on it.
Do we know if there's been, so these cities that have these types of waivers, do we know, have they been successful in developing this type of housing?
I mean, you could look at large cities, and of course, there's success in, at a much higher scale than we're probably going to see. I think it's really, our situation here is unique to probably what this land development, this action plan, these are probably comparing some pretty big cities,
Portland
Salem,
and
Eugene,
Tigard
Portland, where they're actively building this type of housing, and there's developers all over the place interested in building it. Here, we don't have that. We are unique, I think, and it would be bold to do something like this without any strings attached, of course. But we need to develop a.
Could it be said that it has to be a rental unit for 5 years? And that these apply up to square footages of, pick a number, 800 square foot, 1,000 square foot of units? I don't know, I think you're defining them as workforce housing by the size and making them rentals. But I don't see the risk there. And we have a cap.
Again, I think we need to have Lori look at a policy that really fits us. And the policy that we have here, it wouldn't. So.
Could you reach out to some communities that are similar size, like Sutherland and Winston and?
We've looked at multiple communities. I think we've grabbed samples from many different communities, and they all do the same thing.
Yeah.
Similar language to what we have, which is there is a caveat that includes some accountability, either low rent or AMI. There's some criteria built in there that guarantees they're going to do this to provide this type of housing. There's no barrier for the person asking for the funding right now. He can set the rent at $1,800 for a studio apartment if that's what the market bears. Mm-hmm. That's not the. I just don't think that's the direction we're looking for.
We can work with Lori and try to come up with something a little bit more palatable, and we don't want to make it too burdensome for the applicants, but we also don't want to make it so loose, like Tony said, to where there's zero, skin in the game for them. They're just getting a 50% discount. And we want to make sure that the purpose of this is to, for our workforce housing needs in this community, which is huge, as was discussed earlier. So,
I mean, if anyone in here thinks that they're building that fourplex to not make a profit, I mean, this is 50% of the SDCs going into somebody's pocket.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's exactly the point. These developers are building for a profit. And when you take away profit incentives, they don't build. So it's a balance. I get it. I don't think the city should be giving away money either. I think that, we want to accomplish what we want to accomplish. So there should be some kind of a, guardrail there to make sure that we're incentivizing the right things. But when you take away profit incentive, people don't do business. That's my feeling on it.
We're creating an incentive for them to come to Brookings instead of do this in other communities.
Exactly.
That's
we're competing with the other communities.
That's the key right there, because for a multifamily developer to come here, there has to be some sort of incentive. And I mean, there's a reason why we're not seeing droves and droves of multifamily being built here, is because the cost for some of these developers is extremely high because of our location and the ability for labor. So
people don't go into business to break even.
No.
But I get what Tony's saying. I'm not discounting what Tony's saying. I get it. I think everybody's got valid points. I'm not trying to be hard-nosed about it. It just, there's a balance to be had, and if we want to encourage, then we need to kind of take a little bit of risk.
Yep, I agree.
If we do a policy that doesn't include any requirements, then again, Lori needs to craft that in a way that, we can accept it and we just move on and move forward with it. I don't see us, the housing needs analysis is really going to show what we have available to be building this type of housing in the first place, which isn't much. But we do have projects on the horizon that are coming up that are probably going to take advantage of this. So what we're looking at right now, we have one request, but this will, I would say in the next few years, we're going to have multiple requests because we do have some projects on the horizon that are going to request this. But I don't want to move the goalpost for people a year later or 2 years later. It should be established now. Let's move forward. And if no strings attached is the way you want to go, then
I'll tell you, with that said, even just in these surveys that have come in so far about the needs of housing, small single-family homes is one of the things that workforce housing needs have talked about. And so I personally have concern about making it only for multifamily housing, if that's gonna exclude us being able to help drive the middle income housing that is needed as well. So, I don't know if that's a separate piece that can come back later, and this is kind of phase one, but I know that's already part of the survey results.
And our housing needs assessment is end of year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think November was the date they're shooting for. We had a meeting today, and with Green Top and talked about where we are. This is our second meeting, and if you just read some of the statements by some of the folks that did fill out the survey, there are people here in our community that are having to. Families are having, aunts and uncles and people are having to live under one roof just to be able to, have a place to live because it's extremely expensive at this point. And, and that's as part of the assessment, we need to take that into an account. And I think by doing something with SDCs, I do think that could spur on some developers that may not give us a second look to all of a sudden giving us a second look. So,
yeah, I think all we can do about it is increase supply. That's the tool we have, and if there's going to be a cost to that, of course.
all right. So shall we direct? Is it the consensus we want a director to develop a policy with no strings?
I don't think anyone up here said no strings. I keep hearing that, but I think there's opportunities there to do that without basing the cost on AMI or rent control. I think that there's got to be some other opportunities there to protect what we're trying to accomplish without going that far. I think that's, in my eyes, that's not a no strings attached policy. That's giving a little bit of flexibility to the developer.
Is there anything in the exemptions that she's listed that you would be comfortable with or not comfortable with?
Are you in the
Page
handout?
two,
Are you on
towards
the
the bottom.
handout? Page two?
Page 2 towards the bottom of the memo. City should decide what types of projects qualify for SDC exemption, including consideration of the following factors.
And I suppose I'm surprised no one does it based on unit size. I haven't seen it anywhere. I read up on this as best I could for this, and I was surprised that it didn't apply to
I
particular
think the
unit size.
affordability piece is automatically going to do that.
Of course, but then that's a rent control. Right? That's how I read it, is that the rental cost has to be affordable under 80% of AMI, and which it ends up being a dollar amount today, right? That you're saying the rent must be a number.
Well, and they must be rental. I mean, for starters, that's step number one, I would think.
So this, like the 4 different bullet points of suggestions there were ownership and or rental housing, including lease to own. I mean, that sounds like, of the list provided here, that sounds like the only one you,
Well, I would think that's a good first step, because if it was an ownership-based thing, there's nothing stopping someone from selling it for a profit right off the bat and put it on the market the next day. I mean, there's no stopping that from occurring, because you can't put stipulations on someone's property like that, I don't think. But if you were to say that, as part of, this opportunity, the development would need to be renter-based, fourplex or higher, square footage size of this, as Councilor Gelada had mentioned, I think those are all strings that could be attached without discouraging development.
does rental need to be defined as long-term rentals?
Yeah, I would think so.
It's inherent, I think, because we don't allow
the code doesn't allow, I believe, and
It doesn't.
Anthony, you could tell me as well, Tony, but I remember when I was on, for my planning commission days, that we did put some restrictions on the type of residences that even could be a short-term rental. It would have to be a single-family residential, am I correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so there's protections there to keep that from occurring.
And at the same time, we lifted the affordable housing, the AMI aspect of ADUs, because that was one of the criteria. To build an ADU, you had to rent it out at a rental rate that met the AMI. That was for accessory dwelling units. But this is sort of a different thing. This is multifamily housing.
But there are some similarities here. But there are some similarities here. A lot of ADUs didn't get built because of that.
True, and we're not really focused on ADUs in this particular thing, because we're really trying to encourage the type of housing that we think our housing needs analysis is going to target. I don't know that ADUs are going to be high priority, but maybe.
You're saying that the AMI reduced the amount of ADUs that were built?
Well, we assume that. We didn't get a lot of applications for ADUs, but we assume SDCs hurt them, because you have to pay SDCs for an ADU, which is roughly $16,000. I think that was probably the biggest deterrent, not necessarily the rent control, but I think that was the initial kick.
Has it changed applications since that's gone away?
No. I think there are a higher interest in ADUs in more rural settings where they got more property. Building ADUs in the backyard of a single-family dwelling lot, minimum 6,000 square foot, is not necessarily desirable for everybody. There's all kinds of just logistical issues with having that type of housing on your property when it's not very big in the very first place. So I think there are other issues. I think ADUs are probably more prevalent in more rural setting. I mean, we have a few, but there's not a lot of interest in it.
But you have to believe that might have had something to do with it.
Okay. So that sounds then like that's I don't, yeah. I'm trying to get your question answered, Tony, of what, because I've definitely heard from this side, but not so much from over here. So I feel like that doesn't really represent necessarily the whole, maybe.
Yeah. We'll probably have another workshop on it.
I was just going to say,
We could bring like a menu of
I have
options.
some level of an agreement with Councilor Malmberg about limiting the strings, limiting the restrictions, and trying to get things built. We have a cap that's protecting us from overextension, and I think we could be aggressive here. Within bounds, but I believe we are competing with the communities around us. We want to attract builders, and this might help.
Well, and I do believe if you establish, like you talked about before, almost like a grant criteria without a ton of strings, and basically put into the situation to where, like say, each fiscal year we're going to $200,000. I'm just throwing a number out. This is how much we're going to budget for this particular grant exemptions, and then for this year. And then that way, if we wanted to stretch out over 5 or 6 years before all the money it's been, the exemption money has been spent.
Utilized.
So,
And I'm sure we could put verbiage on there and Lori could help us with, we are going to emphasize these and we're going to target these, soft words that help us.
Because I wonder how much building do we have to actually start lowering the costs of, you know what I mean? What does that look like? Is that even realistic to think that this is going to spur that much development to start making more homes and more affordable homes?
More is better. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think, again, nobody's done it, so there's no way to know.
Maybe as
But-
part of this housing needs assessment, when we reconvene in a couple weeks, I think our next 3 weeks or so, we can get with Nikki and Matt and say, help us establish what you think maybe a threshold might be to get us to make a difference.
And I was going to ask, are we getting any preliminary results from them, or is it going to be this big package? And
This really isn't their wheelhouse, to be
No,
honest
it's not.
with you. It's not.
but it would help us.
Establishing the type of housing we need is in their wheelhouse with
But-
the agreement that we have with them right now. This is, we've already been through an SDC establishing the methodology. We've already done that. We already know the type of housing that we're targeting. It really comes down to how we want to craft the policy. I don't think that they're not going to offer.
Okay.
And I think it's really our city attorney and you guys, your comfort level with how you want to establish that. And we can write the code or the policy to match what your desires are. It sounds like, that's what it sounds like, what Lori says.
No, what I was referring to is having some sort of threshold. I mean, these guys do this for a living, as far as like this many more multifamily units will start making a difference. And I don't know. I'm just thinking there might be a scientific thing for them to plug in the numbers. I don't know. Like I said, that's.
I think four unit minimum is a good starting point.
Yeah.
Because it really eliminates duplexes, because those are investment properties. A lot of times you buy one, you buy a duplex, and you rent the other half out. Yeah. So that's
no condos.
I know that townhouses can be that way too. So fourplexes and up usually are more related to apartments, and yes, likely affordable. But our rents here are so high that even a fourplex could be and
then also making it rental only, I think, is a step in the right direction. There's some, if you make it purchase available, someone from out of the area could buy it as a vacation home and use it 4 months out of the year, whatever. That doesn't help out our workforce here. So I think that would be another step in the right direction.
So rental minimum 5 years could be a criteria. We could set that it's a rental. Not necessarily how much the rent is, but it's a rental.
Enforceable to?
Yeah, I mean,
they would sign an affidavit. I think when they receive the funding, we would set up an affidavit. Deed restriction, yeah.
And then basically the requirement is they repay the city for those fees if they don't withhold that agreement.
I think those are all good steps.
Okay, so I'm going to ask another new guy question. How come I don't see anything about using the local labor force to assist with this?
We would.
Why is that not a criteria for
to have them use local contractors? I don't think we can. I don't know if Lori could answer that, but we don't generally
get question, but
I think
I'm not seeing that.
Well, but I think if you have a developer, let's just say he's out of Medford or Eugene or someplace, I mean, it's going to make more sense for them to develop those relationships with the electricians and plumbers in the area to do it. I mean, I don't think they're going to be bringing a whole team of, I don't know, maybe they might, depends on the size of the job, but I think you're talking about a fourplex, I don't think you're going to, I think it's going to spur some local activity among some of the smaller contractors myself, so.
And back to the volume discount, where
Yeah.
there's some like longevity that if they start this, they could see those go down, and I believe that would encourage them hiring local, establishing a local presence. If there was longevity there, that if they could continue to see those, as long as they continue to build, they get lower SDCs.
I'm concerned that it's a means and method question. It's be an attorney question, for sure. Controlling the
I'm not familiar with the,
controlling the means and method of a contractor building out a project. There's,
okay.
so I mean, that, again, I'm open to that, but I don't know that that's.
Yeah, I mean, there are some, it's tough. It's tough using public money just for local, like in procurement law anyway, you can try to do that, but there's a bunch of hoops to jump through. But I can do some quick research on that and see, you maybe add it as a criteria, you get more points.
You could add it as a goal.
Or you're encouraged, you get a bonus point. There's a way to work it where you don't make it. It's not a big break, but it's like, it might, if there's a tie, it would nudge that particular developer over the line to get, right?
Like your TIFA application that said, we encourage off-season events. There could be words in there that we encourage
I'm just
local
saying,
labor.
if you're gonna get it to a point to where you're talking about a percentage of the SDC being reduced, it would make sense that the city of Brookings is using those funds for our local community as well by adding that as a criteria in order for them to receive those SDCs. It's their money.
No, I agree. It's a valid, it's another string.
I can tell you right
It's
now,
another
around
string.
here, that's a big issue with the contractors, is when you get contractors coming from out of town into our area.
Yeah.
One thing, folks, too, that I've been scrolling through, looking up stuff as we're talking, and there's a paper about how Portland's been so successful in doing affordable housing. And I heard the word rent control thrown around, and that is the thing they use, but they limit it 1 unit out of 4, or 1 unit out of 6. Needs to be 80% AMI or 60% AMI. That's another way, just at least having 1 unit, and then it's still market rate housing for the rest of it. So anyway, I could do more research. It looks like there's some other programs out there. I know this is specific. We've been talking about SDCs, but the city of Medford has a property tax exemption for 10 years. For multi-unit housing, to encourage multi-unit housing to get built in Medford. I don't know how successful that's been, but speaking of Matt, I think he was instrumental when he was planning director of Medford in helping get some of those types of policies implemented. So there's other things to look at. I don't know if we want to stray that far because we've just been talking SDC, but I just thought I'd bring that up.
And she's referring,
That.
Lori, you referring to Matt with Green Top? Brinkley?
Yeah, I might bring it, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's you just have to look at, a contractor's going to look at return on investment. And if they're saving $50,000 in SDC fees, I don't know how much money we think a fourplex is going to be in 50% of SDC fees. Do you have a rough magnitude? What do you think?
Oh, I had it written out at the last meeting. Sorry, I didn't bring it with
It's
me.
like 50 or 80 grand, or I don't know. It wasn't a lot, right?
50, well, I think I was offering like a 20% at the time we did the calculation, and I want to say it was like $15,000 or something like that on their
It's not a
SDC.
huge amount of money. And then when you add on constraints like rent control or things like that, their return on investment, instead of maybe I don't know, ROI of 7 years, now it's a 15-year or something. I don't know. See what I mean? They're going to make these kind of business decisions when they determine whether or not it's feasible to take advantage of these things. So maybe, I don't know, maybe 1 out of the 4, maybe that's a reasonable thing. But again, the more strings you put on it, then you say, oh, well, now you got to use only a local workforce. Well, okay, now it's going to cost me an extra 10 grand. Okay, maybe because they're more expensive. So at some point, it defeats the purpose. The more strings you attach, the contractor's return on investment gets less and less, and they're less likely to want to take advantage of any of these. So you kind of have to cap it a little. You have to be, if you want to encourage that type of development, you have to make it attractive for an investor. That's my perspective.
Okay, well, we got some work to do, so.
Yep.
We should meet on this again.
Well,
Maybe when we're
we
not also
we have a
Haven't eaten
workshop, a workshop in July, we'll talk about it again.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
I feel like we need to have another workshop, and I want to talk with Lori a little bit more detail about how we can put together a policy that I think meets what I'm hearing tonight. So we've got a little bit more work to do. And your input tonight helped, I think, get us a big step forward. So we'll take that. I know it's going to take more time, and we have a request for a waiver right now sitting on the table that he's waiting for, and I'll just have to tell him we're still working it out.
And we cannot, I guess because it's a one-off, we cannot just discuss that waiver in isolation.
No, because you have to make it fair to everybody.
That's right.
Yeah.
Then you're giving a decision to
Right.
one person and not making it a criteria that has to be followed. It's got to be equitable.
understand.
I'd like us to prioritize that as our next workshop topic then, because it does sound like it's we could potentially take advantage of, someone is looking to take advantage of this opportunity in the very near future, and so I think
yes, sure. Between myself and Tony and Lori, we ought to be able to bring something back.
And large gaps between this conversation isn't helping, right? If we can,
Well, unfortunately, we have workshops, we have them every once a month or twice?
Twice a month.
Twice a month.
So I want to get this moving along too, so
Yeah,
we're
sure.
going to get on this. If Lori can help us out the next couple weeks, we can try and get it done.
July 13th would be the next meeting.
It's going to be 3 weeks.
get a week off for 4th of July.
Do you need anything more from us?
I hope not. We'll see after the next meeting.
Okay. All right.
And you guys might get to thinking about it a little bit more and just email Tim with suggestions, and we'll
Okay.
take in consideration.
Well, sounds like we definitely have a request for that next workshop already. Is there any more that we need to bring up right now? Okay, then we will adjourn